Right, so it really does come to something when Keir Starmer, of all people, the beige, boring, bank manager-ish leader of the Labour Party, still manages to shock me with just how venomous and callous he can be, especially at Prime Minister's questions, where he is supposed to push back on the even more out-of-her-depth leader of the Tories, Kemi Badenoch. But what happened yesterday was an out-and-out display of white supremacy between the two leaders, and I use that phrasing very intentionally, despite Badenoch being black, of course, because that is still what she was doing, and her own complexion should not shield her from criticism for that. A scheme designed to help refugees from Ukraine to come here to the UK is now being used by a family of 6 from Palestine to be able to come here as well. Thus far, the scheme has helped 200,000 people from Ukraine come to the UK, overwhelmingly white, almost half of whom are also apparently blonde. Yet 6 people, just 6 from Palestine, who have family here in the UK already, hence their case, are apparently 6 too many, and the law must be changed. Too brown for both sides is the message that's been sent out to the country, making this probably the most racist edition of PMQs I've ever borne witness to.
Mr. Speaker, the Conservative government established the Ukraine Family Scheme, and in total, over 200,000 Ukrainians, mostly women, children and the elderly, have found sanctuary in the UK from Putin's war. However, a family of 6 from Gaza have applied to live in Britain using this scheme, and a judge has now ruled in their favour. This is not what the scheme was designed to do. This decision is completely wrong. It cannot be allowed to stand. Is the government planning to appeal on any points of law? And if so, which ones?
Minister. Mr. Speaker, let me be clear. I do not agree with the decision. She's right. It's the wrong decision. She hasn't quite done her homework because the decision in question was taken under the last government, according to the legal framework of the last government. But, Mr. Speaker, let me be clear. It should be Parliament that makes the rules on immigration. It should be the government that makes the policy. That is the principle, and the Home Secretary is already looking at the legal loophole which we need to close in this particular case.
Mr. Speaker, he did not answer the question. If he plans to appeal, then the appeal may be unsuccessful and the law will need to be changed. And if he does not appeal, the law definitely will need to be changed. He talks about a decision made under the last government. It was not made by the last government, it was made by the courts. The issue we are discussing today is about judicial decisions. We cannot be in a situation where we allow enormous numbers of people to exploit our laws in this way. There are millions of people all around the world in terrible situations. We cannot help them all, and we certainly cannot bring them all here. Will he commit to bringing forward that new legislation or amending his borders bill?
Prime Minister. Well, Mr. Speaker, I've already said the Home Secretary has already got her team working on closing this loophole. We don't need to wait for that. We're getting on with that because we're taking control. They lost control of immigration. We had nearly 1 million people come into this country, had an open borders experiment. On a Monday of this week, they voted against increased powers to deal with those that are running the vile trade of people smuggling. Same old Tories, open borders, empty promises.
Right, so that was the exchange in question. 2 questions, the very first 2 questions fired at Starmer by Badenoch at this edition of Prime Minister's Questions, both about immigration, because both sides are petty Reform UK tribute acts now. Nigel Farage must be delighted, rubbing his hands together with glee as they make his arguments for him. Starmer enacting policies he would try and stem the flow of votes Labour is losing to Reform, but he's too politically stupid to realise he's just promoting Reform by carrying out their reprehensible racist policies and moves. Badenoch, thinking she can go even harder, but equally lacking in any political talent, just ended up back on the ropes as ever. Even a political pygmy like Starmer is regularly untroubled by her. But she epitomises the problem in the UK politics today. That whilst we have 3 political parties, all ideologically driven by the politics of Nigel Farage, the Overton window as a result just carries on being skewed ever further to the right. The media to blame in no small part for platforming Farage and reform as they do. They literally have two news channels, alleged news channels, entirely devoted to them virtually, in GBB's and Murdoch's Talk TV. They're basically full-time advertisers for Farage's outfit. The rest of the media either talking to them as well or talking about them at the expense of actual progressive politics makes the problem even worse though. Progressive politics such as the Green Party, and oft-made criticism of them being they aren't loud enough. But equally, they don't give them the platform to be loud that others do either. 200,000 Ukrainian refugees have been permitted to settle here. When you listen to all of the rhetoric, though, about people in small boats or migration policy in this country in general, those 200,000 are perfectly acceptable. Therefore, the hypocrisy when it comes to the issue of immigration more generally in the UK becomes properly gut-wrenching, doesn't it? But this is made all the more so in the example that just bore out in front of our eyes, because in contrast to that overwhelmingly white, 45% blonde, proper Aryan individuals, as I'm sure people watching this will be concluding, 200,000 of them from Ukraine, compared to just 6 Palestinians. Well, it's not a floodgate here at all, is it? But Starmer is all over it. Doesn't agree with the judge? Well, tough. You aren't DPP anymore. Know your place, sunshine. Law applies to you as well. But he's still deploying Little Miss Immigration Mugs Yvette Cooper to close this apparent loophole that this Palestinian family is using. And I'm going to come back to that loophole in a moment. But hundreds of thousands of white blonde people are perfectly acceptable versus 6 brown-skinned people from occupied territory being genocided. No, that's completely unacceptable. We can't have that. Loophole must be closed. It's pure white supremacy. It is absolute racism. For as much praise as the UK has had for accepting people escaping the war zone in Ukraine, the same cannot be said for those escaping the war zone that is literally the entirety of the Gaza Strip. UK refugee policy is therefore racist. Don't praise them for it at all. They don't deserve that. If they don't want to create brown-skinned refugees daring to seek asylum here, then stop selling the white supremacists destroying them and their lives the arms to create said refugees. I truly never thought my disdain and disgust for Starmer could get lower, but it absolutely has. The man revolts me in a way I don't think any other UK political leader of my lifetime ever has. Sure, others have caused more damage. He's still got time. But to be this detestable frankly takes talent. We found something, finally, Starmer's actually good at. Getting people to hate him. The Ukrainian Family Sponsor Scheme, you may recall, was set up in 2022. Perhaps somebody who watching this took part in it. And as much as the UK got plaudits for that, they didn't deserve any even then, because it was ordinary families taking these refugees in and giving them a place to stay. Usually it was another Ukrainian family who were already settled here, or people who could apply to become sponsors of given individuals wishing to escape the war. Well, now a Palestinian family has been able to use that same scheme due to this loophole, as Starmer and Badenoch have put it. But actually it wasn't a loophole at all. Their right to have come here and stay here is enshrined in the Human Rights Act under Article 8, the right to a family life, because the father had a brother already living here in the UK, now a British citizen and having lived here for the last 18 years. Citizenship now up for racist political interference, as well as anyone now coming here via small boat to claim asylum will be barred from ever seeking British citizenship, a move that will surely end up in the Court of Human Rights, widely seen as a clear breach of international law as that is. Without any legal route to get here to claim asylum, British citizenship would be impossible to achieve except to people the government want here, and most migration happens to be from selective favourable nations, picking and choosing who come here therefore, whilst discriminating against refugees not party to a scheme such as the Ukrainian one, but making little difference to the overall immigration numbers. And behaviour like this from our leaders, well, I'll bet the vast majority of migrants coming here thereafter will be white, don't you? A refugee is a refugee though. In both instances here, Ukraine and Palestine, we're talking people escaping established war zones, people whose lives have been destroyed by it. But literally the only difference here is skin colour. 200,000 whites, great. 6 brown people, though, travesty. All despite the UK being signatories to the Refugee Convention and the European Court of Human Rights. But hey, Starmer's trying to ape Reform UK. So much, right down to migration leaflets sporting Reform's colours, filming deportees boarding planes, he might take us out of these legal structures yet. The former human rights lawyer, let's not forget. We'll know Farage really is in charge, though, if that comes to pass. Frankly, all Starmer needs to do now is start dragging his knuckles on the ground as he moves around, and the transformation will be complete. As you might imagine, legal experts have weighed in to point out Starmer's abject stupidity and wrongness here. Colin Yeo, an immigration barrister and editor of the blog, wrote on Blue Sky This is bad, full stop. It creates a class of person who are forever excluded from civic life, no matter how long they live here. It's also a clear breach of the Refugee Convention. Article 31 of the UN Refugee Convention says the contracting states shall not impose penalties on account of their illegal entry or presence on refugees. Enver Solomon, the chief executive of the Refugee Council, said the move flies in the face of reason. The British public want refugees who have been given safety in our country to integrate into and contribute to their new communities. So many refugees over many generations have become proud, hard-working British citizens as doctors, entrepreneurs and other professionals. Becoming a British citizen has helped them give back to their communities, and this should be celebrated, not prevented. Great points made, clear-cut breach of the law as well, but that is the scale of racism at the top of UK politics, both in government and in opposition. In fact, it should go double for Badenoch as a person of colour herself, who has made far too much of immigration for someone whose mother took advantage of UK birthright citizenship to come from Nigeria, specifically to give birth to Kemi in Wimbledon, to then return to Nigeria. Kemi then staying there and growing up there until she was 16, a self-confessed first-generation migrant herself. Talk about pulling the ladder up. Besides all of this, though, the war in Ukraine between them and Russia would probably have been settled years ago had Boris Johnson not interfered and told Zelensky to walk away, lest his convenient bolt hole in Kyiv, when he needed to run away from awkward questions being asked of him, be closed off. Starmer and Badenoch are justifiably getting rinsed here. Labour and Conservative polling will continue to decline, but if Reform are the party that keeps reaping the benefit of that, what exactly is going to change? Because the level of racism in our political discourse sure as hell won't be. Meanwhile, it's not just citizenship getting stolen from people coming here, but our pensions are getting thieved too. Rachel Thieves is after pension cash, even to the extent that Labour-controlled councils are getting their pension schemes plundered, apparently, by the central party taking over. So democracy continues to get thrown out of the window under the Starmer regime, and very much the case if you vote Labour, apparently. Will it be your pension next? Well, check out all the details of that story in this video recommendation here as your suggested next watch. Please also hit like, share and subscribe before you do so, though, so as to ensure you don't miss out on all new daily content and help support the channel at the same time, which of course is very much appreciated. And I will hopefully therefore catch you on the next vid. Cheers, folks.